watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. Let's take a look at the top stories this evening. It's a temporary reprieve for power firms facing insolvency. The Allahabad High Court orders that no action be taken against power companies on the basis of the central bank's new stressed asset framework. They also request the Finance Ministry to hear their plea. Farmers across India go on a 10-day nationwide protest. Demands include right prices for crops, farm loan waivers and implementation of MS Swaminathan Committee report. The CBI summons former Finance Minister P Chidambaram for questioning on June 6th in relation to the INX media case. It's a month of joy for automakers as sales surge. Maruti clocks the best monthly sales in over a decade. And GST collection figures for April exceed the average mop-up after the launch of e-way bills, but falls slightly short of the previous month's collections. Spain does not have a prime minister as Mariano Rajoy fails the floor test. Socialist leader Pedro Sanchez will become the next prime minister of Spain. Well, the Allahabad High Court has requested the Finance Ministry to consider a plea filed by the Independent Power Producers Association of India. The plea sought to not bring stressed power assets under the IBC framework unless they are willful defaulters. Bhanvi Arora sums up the development.
The Allahabad High Court has provided a temporary relief to the power companies against RBI's new stricter bad loan norms. The court has said that no decision will be taken against the power companies till the Finance Ministry hears the disagreement. The order was passed by a bench headed by Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court, Justice Dilip B. Bhosle and Justice Suneet Kumar. The Secretary at the Finance Ministry will decide the date and time of the meeting in June, which will include all the power producers, including the one who has filed the petition. RBI in its Feb 12 circular had laid down strict timelines for initiating insolvency proceedings. Now, according to the Association of Power Producers, almost 60,000 to 70,000 megawatt power projects will be pushed towards bankruptcy if these norms were to be implemented. Earlier in May, Power Ministry had to meet their RBI counterparts, but the meeting was deferred. Power Ministry had also asked the Finance Ministry to seek an exemption for the power sector for these norms, but the Finance Ministry had put down the request saying that they cannot provide a relief to the particular sector.
All right, Harry Dole, Director General of the Independent Power Producers Association, joins us on the phone line. Very good evening, Mr. Dole, and thank you for speaking with us here at Bloomberg Quint. One key question, how much of a relief, of course, but why the special treatment for the power sector? Because the RBI's stringent norms impact other key sectors as well.
Well, number one, the reason for the differentiation in the power sector has two parts to it. The first part is we are a regulated sector, and unlike other sectors, we are already being regulated left, right and center by all kinds of state and central regulations, government policies, etc. And therefore, before you start mechanically putting us in the same category as anybody else, with due respects to the Reserve Bank, you need to understand where the problem lies. Imagine that you go ahead mechanically and refer these $75 billion worth of power projects to the NCLT because they become NPA. The question then comes, why have they become NPA? The NPA they have become is because the government companies, Coal India, etc., are not supplying coal to the required level of the kind of quantity and the quality. Second is the railways, which again is government control, is not able to supply the coal on time. If you look today, you'll find there's a coal shortage across the country in most power plants. Last point is the buyers of power, which is the distribution companies, are not paying money on time, etc. They are excuses that they are running into losses for whatever reason. Now, if the problem lies somewhere else, by mechanically passing an order saying that you must be subjected to what everybody else is being subjected to, is not going to solve the problem. You're going to pay $75 billion worth of bad assets for no rhyme or reason. So our submission is that you need to find a solution because there's no point shooting the wrong guy.
Okay.
The problem is not with the power producer. The problem lies somewhere else, which is in the government hands. And government has been subsidizing the distribution companies since 2002.
Sure.
And the second point which I want to make is, in the power sector itself, there's a distinction and there's a discrimination happening. NTPC and Power Grid and NHPC, which are government undertakings, for the last 10-15 years, are getting special treatment in getting their money from the state discoms through what is called a subvention scheme, whereby if the state discom doesn't pay NTPC, there is this threat that the state subvention will be taken away. There's a tripartite agreement with RBI and the state government to do this. If that is the case, then why should the private power producer be discriminated against?
Okay, Mr. Dhol, you've put your case well, and of course that is perhaps what has got you the reprieve from the High Court. But just give us an idea of whether any of these projects actually went through the resolution route. Were there conversations with banks? Was there any progress there? And what was the problem at that end?
The problem is very simple in the power sector. If you imagine you are the owner of a power plant, you have got there are two cases. One is you have a power purchase agreement, or the second is you don't have a power purchase agreement. If you have a power purchase agreement, then you are supposed to get, let's say, 100 tons of coal. You're getting 50 tons of coal. And you're being told the balance 50 tons you have to buy through e-auction, which means that what you have contracted to be given to you as a power producer is being sold on the open market to unregulated people like cement, steel industry, etc. They don't have a regulation. They don't have a tariff cap. They don't have all these kind of difficult things that the power sector has to go through to make sure consumer gets cheap power. Second point is, if you don't have a PPA, as per the Electricity Act 2003, we were supposed to have market or competition and open market. That has been absolutely stifled and crippled by various agencies, including the distribution companies. They do not allow you open access. They don't give consumer a choice. And the result is there's a shortage of power. There's an increase in power prices. In the last couple of weeks, you can notice power prices went up to 11, 12 rupees. Now, in theory, the power price is supposed to come down. If you create these artificial barriers and create these artificial situations, you are not going to get the best results. And therefore, the answer does not lie in mechanically saying, all right, anybody who has an NPA within 24 hours, he should be referred to wherever he has to be referred to.
Okay. What is the way forward now, Mr. Dhol, now that you have this reprieve from the High Court? What is the way forward to relieve the power sector and some of these projects from the list of stressed assets? Where do we go from here?
Basically, where we go from here is we are very positive and keen to work with all the stakeholders and the government agencies to make sure that the consumer gets continuous high-quality, round-the-clock power, just as our Prime Minister has visualized, at a reasonable price. And to do that, we need to get rid of all of these artificially created aberrations which stop these guys from performing, stop the private producers from performing. That's number one. Number two, we are also very excited about the fact that even the Parliamentary Committee has commented on this. So has the Ministry of Power and the other agencies and the stakeholders. And I think this needs to be taken very seriously, where discrimination against the private power producer versus the government power producer is removed. We want to be treated on par. When I switch on my light, I don't know it's a private fellow's power or it's a public. It doesn't make any difference to me. Electricity is electricity, number one. Number two, electricity is a national asset. Number three, electricity is the lifeline of this country's economy, which is about to take off in a very big way, thanks to the vision of the present government, which is in the mood to solve problems and not create them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hari Dhol, for speaking with us. That was a perspective from the Powers Producers Association. But let's also get you a quick reaction from V.G. Kannan, CEO of the Indian Bankers Association.
I do not foresee a possibility of Reserve Bank of India actually changing it only for one sector. The capital distribution for all sectors. Unless it's a very one-off case, but I am not too sure about it. Other sectors could say that why only one sector, if at all RBI agree, it should be action the others. That is wait and watch and how it progresses.
Well, it was a news story which wasn't to be. This morning, a prominent financial newspaper reported that Chanda Kochhar has been asked to go on leave. ICICI Bank's board quickly denied that report. Vishwanath Nair gets you all the action through the day on the ICICI Bank MD and CEO.
Private sector lender ICICI Bank on Friday released a statement to the stock exchanges as well as to the press saying that it is denying any news report which suggests that the MD and CEO of the bank, Chanda Kochhar, was asked to go on indefinite leave. Along with that, ICICI Bank has also denied that it has appointed a search committee to look for a successor to take over after Chanda Kochhar. Now remember, this whole conversation and this controversy started with a news report in Mint that came out Friday morning, which suggested that the MD and CEO of ICICI Bank had been asked to go on indefinite leave by a majority of the independent directors on the bank's board. This was in conjunction with an investigation and an inquiry that has been initiated against Chanda Kochhar in the Videocon Group loan case. Remember that back in 2016, there was a blog post which suggested that in the matter of approving loans for Videocon Group, Chanda Kochhar had breached the code of conduct or had been subjected to some kind of conflict of interest because her husband had business dealings with Venugopal Dhoot, who is the promoter of Videocon Group. The bank at the time did not respond to any of this, and later on in 2018, when this topic became hot again, the bank clearly denied. In fact, the bank's board put out a statement saying that it fully supports its MD and CEO and does not believe that she acted in any way that was against the code of conduct. But that was in March 2018. After that, the bank said that it had received another anonymous complaint against the MD and CEO about some serious issues with the way she had dealt with certain corporate loan accounts, and thereby the board has now initiated this independent inquiry through an independent person who will be appointed by the audit committee of the board. All in all, at this point in time, the bank is claiming that Chanda Kochhar is actually on a planned leave and has not been asked to go on indefinite leave by the board of the bank.
Well, India's manufacturing activity showed some signs of moderation in May. The Nikkei India Purchasing Managers Index fell to 51.2 in May from 51.6 in the previous month. A reading below 50 indicates contraction in activity, while a number above 8 signals expansion. Manufacturing activity in the country has remained above the 50-point mark for the 10th consecutive month. A build-up of inflationary pressures amid persistent crude oil rally led to input and output costs rising at the fastest pace since February. And we're days away from the monetary policy. There are many elements to it as well. Inflation, growth, exchange rate with yesterday's GDP figures and today's manufacturing PMI both showing strength. The debate among the economic fraternity is divided, with some saying it's time to hike rates and others opposing it. Ira Dugal posed some of these specific questions to two economists earlier in the day.
Primary objective is to keep inflation anchored close to 4%. Now, in the last review, the RBI said, and we were surprised that they brought their inflation forecast down to 4.4. Think of what's happened since then. Oil has moved up another 15%. You've had two very strong core inflation prints, adjusting for housing and making all the adjustments you need to, which suggests that input prices have gone up. Pricing power is coming back into the system, which is what the RBI surveys say as well. And so in a way, core inflation is today running at 5.2%. Oil is back up, the rupee has weakened, global financial conditions have tightened, and you've got the promise of MSP increases. Even if you make conservative assumptions on those MSP increases, 1 year ahead inflation, which is what I think you should look at, next Jan to March, is now running at 5% or above. So in the infant stages of a new regime, if your medium-term target is 4% and your 1 year ahead forecast is 5%, I think that's reason enough to begin to tighten monetary policy. I'm indifferent about whether they should do this in June or August. Okay. I think the case for June would be to be proactive. Indonesia has moved, global financial conditions have tightened. The case for August is there's no real panic. let's have some more continuity in communication.
Yeah.
Let's use June to change our forecast, change our stance and prepare markets and raise rates by 25 basis points. But I think it should be done largely because inflation now will be uncomfortably above their 4% benchmark.
Okay, so even
Their
on
target.
inflation alone, you think it's justified,
That's
and the
right.
core inflation chart will come up on the screen. Indranil, you have a different view on how you see inflation. So.
Yeah, so we believe that the RBI should pause in June because the bulk of the inflation that we are seeing now is because of base effects. Inflation will cross 5% in June. That's against 2% last year. Take an average, it's 3.5%. The same holds for core inflation. Core inflation came down last year, so it's naturally going up on base effects right now. Once you're past June, maybe into July, into August, we think that the environment changes dramatically towards our October rate cut. Number one, inflation will begin to come down, barring a hump in September. We think inflation goes down towards 4% levels in the second half of the year, and that is where the RBI also came in the last policy, as you know. So that's number one. Number two, we think that we are going to see normal rains, and once it starts pouring, I think the fears of agflation will begin to go away. Number three, growth now will look great because of base effects, 7.5% in the next 2 quarters, but then it will start to come down, and then the questions arise that when growth is where it is, should you actually be having yields at these levels? And if global flows do not come, we are actually looking at almost $30 billion of OMO purchases this year, which should also begin to bring down yields.
And farmers across the country have gone on a 10-day-long nationwide protest to press for their demands, including a farm loan waiver and the right price for their crops. Here's a special report. Joining us on the show now is Ashok Dhavle, National President of the All India Kisan Sabha, one of the umbrella organizations which is behind these protests. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Dhavle. Can you explain to us what you hope will be achieved in 10 days of these protests?
No, you see, actually the real truth is that the All India Kisan Sabha is not among the organizations which have called for these protests. But however, today being the 1st of June, that is the first anniversary of the historic farmers' strike in Maharashtra that happened last year, and which continued for 11 days. The government had to bend and had to agree to important demands like a partial loan waiver, etc. So today what we had done was we had given a call on behalf of the All India Kisan Sabha on the 1st of June, since it was the first anniversary of the historic farmer strike. We had given a call for gherav of district collectorates and tehsil offices all over the state. And thousands of farmers came out and actually took part in these protests all over the state of Maharashtra today. Our agitation was limited to today because it was the farmer strike. However, the other organizations that have called for this strike, although we are not part of it, we are not also opposing it. And if a strike takes place, etc., all right. I mean, see, because after all, the agrarian crisis the situation of the peasantry is extremely serious all over the country. It is quite natural that different organizations, different groups of organizations can come together and give calls for agitations. So therefore, that is a part of that. But one thing I can definitely tell you, all over the country, the farmers are up in arms. That is one thing very clear for the last 1 year. Not only in Maharashtra, in all over the country. We have seen the huge struggle led by the All India Kisan Sabha in Rajasthan, where tens of thousands of farmers gathered, wrested a loan waiver. In Maharashtra, we wrested a loan waiver from the BJP government, just as the Rajasthan Kisan agitation did. We have an organization, umbrella organization called the All India Kisan Sangharsh Samanvay Samiti, which, as you know, in the last, November last year, had organized a huge Kisan Sansad of thousands of farmers in Delhi. And we have formulated 2 bills, which will be placed soon before Parliament. One bill is for a complete loan waiver for farmers all over India. The second bill is one for remunerative prices for farmers all over India.
Okay.
And these are the 2 bills, on which we are having a huge fight in the coming days.
Mr. Dhavle, I just want to ask you a question on farm loan waivers, because there is a common theme in all of the farmer protests we've been seeing, and no matter which organization is driving those protests, the themes remain similar. Implementation of the MS Swaminathan Committee report is one, higher MSPs, of course, which the government is claiming that it's trying to implement, and farm loan waivers. I want to understand from you, sir, that several states have announced farm loan waivers. They have attempted to implement them as well, and there have been reports that they're not satisfactory. Are farm loan waivers really the answer to the woes we're seeing in the rural sector?
You see, number one, I would like to answer this in 3 very short parts. Number one, what you said is right, that the state governments that have implemented, that has not at all been satisfactorily implemented, the loan waiver schemes that they have announced. Number one. The second very, very cardinal thing is that actually it should be the central government which is announcing and implementing a farm loan waiver, because that has the maximum number of resources. 2 central governments earlier have declared and have implemented loan waiver. So therefore, but this government of the BJP is not even mentioning the word loan waiver as far as the center is concerned. Number 2. Third point which I would like to say, you see, farm loan waiver, why are we demanding? Because for the last 22 years, more than 4 lakh farmers have been forced to commit suicide all across the country as a result of these neoliberal policies that have been implemented by various central governments and most of the state governments also. 4 lakh farmers committing suicide in India over the last 20 years is a tragedy of monumental proportions. Why have they been forced to commit suicide? Because they can't make 2 ends meet. The cost of production is rising as a result of the slashing of subsidies by the central government, as a result of giving multinational corporations a free hand, and therefore seeds, fertilizers, insecticides, all the prices have risen. Therefore, the cost of production has risen on the one hand. On the other hand, there is no attempt at all to give a remunerative price to the farmer for his crops. And that is exactly what has led to the farmer being caught in the scissors of increased cost of production, at the same time lowered the price that he is getting for his crops. And therefore, what we say, this is not the first time. Our Kisan Sabha is of the clear opinion, which has been going on for the last 70 years continuously.
Okay.
The farmers have always got a raw deal, and therefore the loan waiver that we are demanding is actually a compensation for the raw deal that the farmers have got in this country for the last 70 years since independence.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Ashok Dhavle. He is the president of the AIKS. And most automakers had a good May. Monthly sales have grown in double digits despite a relatively base last year. Yatin Mota tells us how prominent automakers fared in the month gone by.
Well, it has been a strong month of May for the automakers, and be it the two-wheeler space or the commercial vehicle space, everywhere we have seen a strong double-digit growth coming in. And starting with Maruti Suzuki, the auto major has reported almost a 26% growth for the month of May. Not only that, this time we have seen a strong growth in the export markets as well for the auto major. M&M total tractor sales were up 12% and the auto sales were up 12%, as you can see on your screens. Escorts, again, it was a positive surprise. We had almost a 21% growth coming in the tractor segment as well as on an overall basis. Ashok Leyland, that surprised on the positive side. We had total sales up 51%, and not only that, the medium and heavy commercial space that saw a growth of nearly 70%. So good growth coming in the heavy commercial vehicle segment. Eicher Motors, the Royal Enfield sales were up 23%. What was the man of the match today was Bajaj Auto. The total sales were up 30% to come in at over 4 lakh units. That stock was up 5% intraday. Good growth coming in the motorcycle segment as well as in the commercial vehicle segment. As far as other companies are concerned, we had Hero MotoCorp, TVS Motors, Tata Motors also reporting double-digit growth. Tata Motors slightly lower than expectations, but look at Hero MotoCorp crossing that 7 lakh units per month mark kind of a run rate. 11% growth, 10% growth for TVS Motors as well. So good show as far as Motown is concerned. Let's wait and watch really as to how rising oil prices and commodity prices do impact the auto demand moving forward. But as of now, it's no looking back, strong growth in the month of May.
The former Union Minister P Chidambaram has been summoned for questioning by the CBI on the 6th of June. This is with regard to the INX Media case. Chidambaram's role in approving FIPB clearances to INX Media is under investigation. This development comes a day after the CBI was told by a court that Chidambaram cannot be arrested till the 3rd of July. The former finance minister had moved 2 courts in Delhi on Wednesday for protection from arrest in the Aircel Maxis as well as INX Media case. Well, now that it's over, there were more reasons to celebrate for both the Congress and the JDS. The deadlock over portfolio allocation in Karnataka has ended, and both parties have also announced that they will be in alliance for the 2019 general elections as well. Nishant Sharma has all the details.
Well, after running the government without a cabinet for nearly a week now, the H.D. Kumaraswamy led Congress and JDS alliance, so they finally announced the cabinet allocation and for the expansion. Now, the delay was really due to the disagreements between the leaders of the two parties for some of the key portfolios such as finance and Home Ministry. Now, after constant deliberation and discussion between the leaders of two parties and constant travel between Bengaluru and Delhi for the same, it was decided that the Finance Ministry will be going to the JDS camp and the Home Ministry will be going to the Congress party. Now, some of the key portfolios that have come to the Congress camp includes Bengaluru City Development, Housing and Agriculture, while some of the key portfolio that has come to the JDS camp includes power, tourism, transport and PWD. Now, the cabinet expansion will take place next week, that's on June 6th. Besides, JDS and Congress have also announced a pre-poll alliance for the 2019 election, and a proper seat sharing arrangement will be decided and will be worked out and will be announced later.
Finally, Congress decided to give finance portfolio to JDS as per the direction of Rahul Gandhi. Today morning, there are little bit issues also there. Today morning we met, myself and PCC President met Devagowda ji along with Kumaraswamy ji and Danishali ji. Then everything is settled.
Well, that's all the time we have on Prime Time. But on Prime Time Debate, we are looking at how brand BJP has tried to reboot itself. It's a slogan which was unveiled on the anniversary of 4 years of completion of the Modi government. It's called Saaf Niyat Sahi Vikas. Will it be a good enough response to the BJP's recent electoral failings? And will this be a kind of branding which will resonate with voters ahead of 2019? Talking about that with us will be Gopal Agarwal, Salman Soz, Krishna Prasad, political analyst, and of course brand specialist Harish Vijur. Do stay tuned.